Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all here. I'm sure you saw me standing here for a few minutes and wondered if I was going to ever say anything. Sorry about that. We had to get all the technical stuff organized. So it's a pleasure to see all of you here. It's great to see this initiative continuing in our community. It is extremely important, and I know that's why you're here. I'm going to say a few words in my welcoming comments, and I know that probably what I say is very common to you because you're out there working in the trenches day in and day out with these issues of literacy. But someone once told me that even though you're speaking to the choir, all choirs need rehearsal. So it's okay to even tell the choir what you need to say. Literacy in our community has been an issue for a long, long time, and we continue to address it. We continue to try to make sure that our community understands the value of having a literate community. And it is without saying that we have an issue. We continue to have an issue. I was talking to Susan Hedy from the center recently, and we've been working on some things for a long time, and with many of you. And we were talking about the measures, the data, the information that we know about our community. And we were a little frustrated that we really haven't moved the needle a whole lot. But I think there is evidence of progress and success all over this community. And you're an example of that. And so coming together is very important to make sure that we continue our efforts, not lose sight of what we're trying to do, and make sure that our collective work, and that's really important, our collective work makes the difference. And we can make a difference. These efforts take a long, long time, especially in a community our size and with the social and economic issues we confront. And so let's not give up. It is very important that we continue this work and that we continue to bring others to this work and continue to involve people, including people in our neighborhoods, because it's extremely important, even in our neighborhoods, to make a difference. Not just in our schools and in our community agencies, but also right there in the neighborhoods with our children. This country has a serious problem, and I don't need to give you any of the data. You have all of that. I'm sure you've memorized it all. But we have a real issue in this country. And I know that there's a lot of efforts nationally and even in our state to try to address this from a larger perspective. But it does take local communities. It takes the local community to make it happen right here in the area, because the state nor the federal agencies can reach out to the minute issues that we have in our communities. So it does take local communities to make the difference, and community by community, this country can reposition itself to be competitive in this global marketplace that we have. And I want to give out a shout out to our superintendent of Grand Rapids Public Schools, who is doing a marvelous job with our children. And one of the greatest things about Teresa is that she keeps children, she keeps the students in the schools at the forefront of everything she does, including every decision that she makes. So thank you, Teresa. You know, there's a lot of issues that we confront when we come together like this in a community summit, because literacy isn't just with our children, it's with our adults also. We need to get our adults in programs. We need to continue to work with adults whose English is a second language, and make sure that we can help them prosper in our community and be able to be productive citizens so that we all work together for the children, because many of those adults have children, and we need to make sure that they do everything that they can as parents. Employers also need to work with the adult population to incentivize them to be literate and to give them incentives and to give them opportunities in the workplace, either with time or with materials, as I've seen some companies do, to make sure that they're doing everything they can as employers to encourage their adult employees to work hard at their own literacy so that they make an impact with their children. You know, I'm really excited that the keynote speaker today will be speaking about attendance. We don't often talk about that, and I'm really pleased that this topic will be addressed, and the topic will be explored to a deeper level. I think attendance makes all the difference. Many factors do, but attendance is critical to what we're trying to do. And I think attendance is not just for literacy and to make sure we have consistency with our children in their learning, but it also promotes the value of education. The children having the value of education is so important in this work. My parents were from this country. We're Mexican Americans, Tejanos. We are originally from Texas. That's where our ancestry is from. And so my first language was Spanish. And my mother went through the 3rd grade and never went to school again. And my father was in, I think, 9th grade when he dropped out of school so he could work to help maintain his the family. And so my parents didn't finish school. They didn't have much education. We really didn't have any books in the home. We were fairly poor. We did a lot of migrant work. My father did odds and ends in the lumber yard and anywhere he could get a job. Eventually moved to Gary, Indiana, where he did find work, steady work in the steel mills. But we never even went to the library. My parents really didn't do those things. They were busy raising the family, doing what they could to make sure that we could sustain ourselves and not be on any public assistance. And we had a Down syndrome child in the family. My younger brother was born with Down syndrome. So they were quite busy just kind of maintaining day-to-day life. But I'll tell you one thing that they did for us. They gave us the value of education. They talked about education all the time. And they never let my older brother and I miss school. We had to be throwing up with 105 fever before we got to stay home. We never, ever got to stay home. That was not something my parents approved of. They felt that school was the most important thing they could give us, and they made sure that we had clothes and the ability to get to school every single morning, even if they had to walk us 2 miles to get there. So it was incredibly important in my family to make sure that attendance was at 100%, and my parents valued that at the end of the year when our report card mentioned that. And what that did for my brother and I is it gave us the value of education and why education was so important. And so both my brother and I went to college. We both came here to Aquinas College. And I think it's just a testament, as there are many, 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 that convince us that no matter where you come from, no matter what the hardships are, that our children can learn. And our children, if they're in school and if they can get a good education, which I know in this community we are all working towards, that this can happen and we can bring children up out of poverty. We can bring children into the workforce with a great future and a bright future. And so I wanted to mention that today as a personal note, because I want us to pay attention to this topic of attendance in school. I was a school psychologist as part of my career, and worked in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And I will tell you firsthand the issues of parents not realizing how every day counts in school. And so we've got to work at that. We've got to make sure that our parents know how important it is to be in school. And they don't have to read, and they don't have to do the homework. There are all kinds of resources that we can provide for that, but they do have to get the students to school. That is so important. And so we move forward in this day-to-day. I hope that you will have some influence on some parents and some children that really escalates this value of education by being in school every single day and struggling every single day, because education and learning is not easy. It's supposed to be hard. Just like all of our muscles, we got to work them, and so we've got to emphasize that. So let's make sure that we do some very important things if we're going to make a difference in this community. And one of those is working together and planning together. And I'm I want to be very complimentary to all of you that have stuck with this literacy initiative for so many years in this community and tried to bring a variety of groups together, both for adults and for children, to make all the difference. Collaborating is extremely, extremely important. We need broad representation as we do this work. It can't get done with single mindedness or single perspectives. It takes the whole community. We need to share and leverage our resources because they are scarce, and we need to do everything we can to pool our resources because that does make a difference. And we need a roadmap, and we've been doing that in this community for quite a while, developing an action plan, a community action plan. And so let's stay on that, and let's communicate. Let's communicate what that plan is. I'm glad to see some media here. I think it's very important to communicate this information across the entire community and what's happening. And the last thing I want to emphasize is the measures. We've got to pay attention to the data. We've got to pay attention to the difference that we are making year by year and really focus on that data in terms of whether it's moving or not. And if it's not moving, let's analyze it. Let's talk about what's not working, what else needs to be done, what is working, and let's expand that. So it's all about continuous improvement. It's all about quality in our community and everything that we do. And it's about you doing everything you can in every part of this community to make a difference. So welcome to Aquinas College. I can't stay. We have a groundbreaking for one of 2 new buildings that are going up starting this fall. And we have a groundbreaking at 10:30 on the other side of campus, so I have to be there. So thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Susan Hedy. I'm the President CEO of the Literacy Center of West Michigan. And before I move the agenda forward, I'd just like to give Dr. Juan Oliveras a round of appreciation for, he was one of our founding champions of really our community literacy initiative, and prior to that it was called Greater Grand Rapids Reads. He really was one of those founding champions that really got it started. So thank you, Dr. Oliveras. I want to thank all of you for coming today. I am very excited about our work today, and our attendance works with Hedy Chang. Very excited about our breakout sessions this afternoon and the involvement of our entire community. As you know, the Literacy Center's programs are primarily focused on working with adults and families, but even with families, we're focusing on adults. However, we felt it was important, and I truly believe that community literacy, all of us working together, as Dr. Oliveras pointed out, is really what is going to move the needle for our community. It's not going to happen with each of us working separately in silos. So I so appreciate your interest today and coming together to talk about that work together. We're going to together build that literate community. So thank you for your interest. Another note of appreciation is in order to all of you. As you know, when you registered for this summit, you paid $35, and out of that $35, $15 of that amount is going as a donation to the Literacy Center. To support the work of the Literacy Center, which not only includes our work with adults, but also this work that we are facilitating in the Community Literacy Initiative. So thank you very much for doing that. Another event that was organized by the Literacy Center not too long ago, our staff in particular, was our flash fiction writing contest. And that was held, and we received many, many entries for the contest. So we are excited to read all of them, of course. I haven't read them all yet, but I'm looking forward to that. But we have several who won the top award, the top 3 awards. And all of the writers were really submitted that out of their passion for our literacy cause. We had expert help in judging this contest. At this time, I would like to introduce Rhoda Jansen, a New York Times best-selling author of Mennonite in a Little Black Dress. She served as our final judge for the contest, and I so appreciate her time to do that, and I welcome Rhoda Jansen to the stage.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be involved in such a worthwhile endeavor. I wanted to say just a word about flash fiction. If you aren't familiar with the genre, this is a fairly new genre. A flash fiction piece is typically about 500 words. It's a miniature story, but it combines all the elements of so many of the genres with which we're familiar. It has the precision of poetry. It has action and power and character development like satire or drama. It has metaphor and plot and theme. So it's actually very challenging to write it, even though it's a little wee piece. It looks like it's about 500 words usually. So as I read the top entries, I was so impressed. And at this time, I would like to announce the top 3 choices for me, wonderful and clear winners. The first, I'm going to read them in order of third prize to first prize. I've been asked not only to announce the names of the authors, but to read my original comments and to say just a word about each of these submissions, which I believe every one of you has access to, right? They can, please do read them if you haven't. They're wonderful pieces. Third prize is called The Carnival. The author is Darren Estes. I did not know any of the authors' names when I made the comments. The Carnival is about a relationship that is floundering, a romantic relationship, and Darren Estes sets the action at a carnival, which is usually, of course, such a happy place. So here are my comments about The Carnival. This story manages the theme of romantic rupture with sure competence. Failed love stories are so hard to write with fresh vision. These days, the successful breakup story demands 2 things: creative metaphor and vocal restraint. The Carnival provides both. The carefully neutral tone of the speaker adverts to the troubled past of this couple, and the speaker has a way of substituting teensy observations like the hair behind the ears or the graduation earrings for the sentimental musings that effectively establish the tension between what the speaker has and what the speaker wants. Finally, the central organizing metaphor surprised me. Carnivals are usually those places of happy celebration, and this one is too, until it isn't. Mr. Estes, please accept my compliments. I'm going to encourage you at this time to keep writing. Please come down and receive your prize. Was it taken? Got it? Okay. And now let's move to second prize. This is a piece called Over Coffee, written by Shane Marshall. This is a small conversational piece. It is set in a coffee house, and we have a speaker who is accidentally overhearing the conversation of some other patrons in the coffee house. These are my comments to Shane Marshall. What we have here is an author who knows how to maximize opportunity. How many folks are able to connect the dots between a humorous, ear-shaving anecdote and an unsettling confrontation with mortality? Yet the second prize turns on more than the sheer originality of this story over coffee. This writing is clean and trained, it seems to me. This is an author who knows how to manage what in drama is called dénouement. In philosophy, we call it epiphany. Flash fiction turns on something called the piqûre. Another word for that is the zinger. The piqûre of a memorable last line, and your tightly repeated last line, not yet, delivers all the possibilities of the genre. And now for one last thing. Your literary situation features a very quiet speaker about whom we don't know very much. We know less about the speaker than we know about the people whom this speaker is observing. So this situation, coupled with that epiphanic last line, for me, recalled Herman Melville's short story, Bartleby the Scrivener. Please go read the story if you haven't recently, and be complimented that you made me think of Herman Melville. Shane Marshall, please come forward and receive your award. Our first prize winner was unable to be with us today. His name is Kirk Nesset. Nonetheless, I'm going to read my description of his story and my comments to Mr. Nesset. This is a piece called Train Days. It is about a stage career magician whose name is Keller. And this magician named Keller, after a life of disappointing career efforts, even though he's successful, has no personal satisfaction, is called back to a hometown where he has a literal and metaphoric confrontation with the ghost of his unpleasant past. Train Days takes first prize for its trifecta of originality, style, and insight. Like Keller himself, the story practices strange magic, a spirit cabinet of surprise. That is, it compacts much into little. In 493 words, we see a whole life and, by extension, a whole philosophy. And this philosophy is seized, regretted, lived, and then ended. As Henry James taught us in The Turn of the Screw, a ghost story needs more than a ghost. This one has more, a whole lot more. The ghost functions as an index of spiritual anxiety, a projection of the utter failure of the rejection of community. That is, it is saying that it is important in order to achieve and sustain meaning that we find and maintain community. Poor Keller, poor us, the author seems to say. Poor we who have allowed ourselves to become distracted by the illusions of the world stage. Modern and crisp, the dialogue and details provide only what the reader needs and no more. Author, here's my prediction for you. If you are not already published, you will be soon. Let's congratulate Mr. Kirk Nesset. Thank you very much.
Well, my good friend, Reverend Tony Campbell, called me one day and said, Bing, I'd like to have you, become a literacy champion for our efforts. And I asked him, well, what is that entail and what is that all about? Because I wasn't really aware about the efforts that's being done here in Grand Rapids in West Michigan.
I was involved way back in the beginning when CLI was the Greater Grand Rapids Reads, when a group of people came together in the community and said, you know, we really need to focus on literacy if we're going to be a really first-class city in the United States.
A large part of my job is connecting people with volunteer opportunities, but early on I really didn't have my own. Until I found Greater Grand Rapids Reads, and I realized that that was something I wanted to get involved in.
A great city has to have people who read, and that means starting at the earliest ages. So then Community College President Juan Olivares and I launched the first Literacy Summit and pulled the community together behind something called Greater Grand Rapids Reads, which has now become the Community Literacy Initiative.
We are a community of many, many small family-owned businesses. And I know for my business itself, we need good, knowledgeable, talented employees. And when I read this data that says that almost 22% of the adults in Grand Rapids are of low literacy levels, that really concerned me.
I think literacy perhaps has the most potential of any other issue within our community. It affects all areas of life, from the way you raise your children, to how you get a job, to how you do in school.
Reading is essential to the economic health and well-being of a community. So teaching literacy from the earliest ages is critical to achieving that goal.
If we can support the work of the schools and all the other organizations that are working with children, whether it's 0 to 5, K-3, high school, that is going to create greater success for those children. Ultimately, they will become adults who are literate.
Well, almost all of our work focuses around growing collaborations and partnerships. One of the things that we were really focused on doing from the beginning was putting together an online literacy providers directory that's called the Community Literacy Directory, and it is translated into Spanish as well, so that parents and literacy providers are able to look up resources for themselves and for their children and make good referrals that make sense for the people in our community.
We are doing a lot of collaboration with universities, with literacy providers and other coalitions to wrap our arms around all the data that's out there.
The two most important things that CLI is doing right now is one is bringing together the representatives from the community and from different organizations and agencies that work in this area of literacy and talking about how can we begin to collaborate with each other, how can we work together, how can we create more awareness. I think that's a critical piece. The other critical piece, and probably the most critical piece, is how do we significantly engage the neighborhood? If we engage citizens as volunteers and teach them how they have the capacity to make a difference for their neighbor's child or their neighbor next door.
I think each month when we hold literacy forums, we hear people say, oh, I didn't know you had that service, or I had no idea you needed this, why don't we collaborate on this? So I think just being able to connect people and see what needs are out there will really help us to work better together to serve the community and improve literacy.
We're also always working on expanding and improving our advisory council, which is a group of high-level leaders that were involved with Greater Grand Rapids Reads in the past and or are involved in community work that is being done currently. But we're also involved in several other partnerships, such as the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which is a national campaign to improve grade level reading by the end of 3rd grade.
Our main objective is to get the word out there so that others who are doing literacy instruction, who are helping people learn to read, whether they're little children or adults, can do their job and do it well.
So in the future, we plan to continue to collaborate and look for those gaps and where we need more data and need more information, and also to continue to publish reports like the one we just did on 3rd grade reading, where we look at a specific topic and find the best information out there.
Education is a community process. You know, the schools always take the lead in it, but the community is the necessary. The community and the parents are the first educators for a group of children. And so the stronger a community is behind education, the better off our children and adults will be as they seek to learn and as they seek to get jobs.
I love facilitating community literacy initiative because to me that's what's going to make 100% literacy. That's how we're going to attain it. I think we don't allow ourselves time or the ability to think of what would our community be like if we did truly have 100% literacy, if we had 100% high school graduation.
If you think about those who are in that situation, they are really imprisoned. They are imprisoned by their inability to have, a reading skill level that allows them to enjoy a quality of life that they deserve to have. So I think that this is so important, and the work has to continue on, and the efforts that the Community Literacy Initiative is doing is critical for the quality of life, not of the individual, but also for the quality of life of all of us, because we're all going to be impacted in some way by a low literacy level in this community.
I believe that literacy is key to our community success because it makes us a fuller, better, richer people in every way, whether we're talking about economic riches or quality of life. Literacy is the key.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Community Literacy Summit 2013. I'm Lindsay McComb, the director of the Community Literacy Initiative. I'm really excited about today. We've been working on this since January, and finally we get to meet Hedy Chang and have all of you together. So thank you so much for being here and for being part of the coalition. I have a few different just housekeeping types of things to do before we move on with our exciting agenda today. The first is, in your registration packet, I have a few specific things to point out. On this agenda, we have a Wi-Fi use at Aquinas College at the bottom. So if you use Wi-Fi on your cell phone or your iPad or your laptop, you can check this out and get on the internet easily that way. The second thing is the next two pieces of information in your packet are all about the workshops and bios of the presenters today. So if you want to choose the workshops that you'll be going to, you can take some time to look at that as we move between our opening session and the lunchtime period. The other thing I'd like you to know is that our keynote speaker, Hedy Chang, will be facilitating a table discussion during lunch. So if you're planning on ducking out during lunch, just know that that's going to happen in case you want to catch that. It's going to be pretty great. We're going to talk about how her expertise and attendance works really fits in with what we're doing in our community. And one of the most important things for us as the Community Literacy Initiative is this evaluation sheet. Western Michigan University evaluates the Community Literacy Initiative. And what I'd really like and appreciate for you to do, if you're not staying all day today, when you leave any time during the day, pull this out, fill it out, give us your feedback about how CLI could benefit you and the community in the future, and drop it off at one of the information tables. We'll have an information table at all of the buildings we're in today, so should be pretty easy, or you can find me and I'll take that from you. But we really want your opinion about what we're doing, and we take it to heart, and we do as much as we can to move literacy forward in the community. So with that, I want to move into thanking a few people who put this or who made this happen. First of all, I'd really like to thank Aquinas College and Juan Olivares for hosting us today. They've been wonderful hosts. They put up with us visiting Aquinas College several times in the planning, and Mark put up with us this morning, needing to be here at 6:55 a.m. So thank you so much for having us. And Rhoda Jansen, I know she had to leave early, but she did a beautiful job judging and speaking about our authors. I'd like to thank our CLI intern, Molly Batchick. She was the person who created this Literacy is Key theme and designed stamps for all of our folders. And her father, Bob Batchick, actually created a handmade print that all of our workshop presenters received today. I'd also like to thank the Doug and Maria DeVos Foundation and W.K. Kellogg Foundation for funding CLI, along with Amway and Heart of West Michigan United Way for in-kind donations throughout the year. Craig Harmer, our cinematographer, Amber Woolsey, our photographer, she's running around today taking photographs. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading and Attendance Works, and Hedy Chang for being here as our keynote. Our summit committee and our co-chairpersons, Fritz Crabb and Tempe Mann. Fritz, where are you sitting here? Can you raise your hand? Fritz had my job when it was Greater Grand Rapids Reads, and he's been my mentor throughout this time. And so he's been great to have as co-chair on our committee this year. And thank you to all of our volunteers, our presenters, our facilitators. We couldn't do this without you. And especially our literacy champions, Mayor George Hartwell and Bing Goy, CEO of Eastern Floral. Thank you for speaking on behalf of the literacy initiative in the community. If you are a CLI Advisory Council member and you are here today, could you please stand up? We'd like to give you a round of applause today. So all of these people who are CLI Advisory Council members, many of them are going to be facilitators at the workshops today. So if you do have questions about CLI or ideas, please approach the facilitator in your workshop and they'll be able to get that idea back to this group of hardworking people who are really moving the literacy needle forward in our community. We have had two co-chairpersons for our advisory council for the past 2 years, Tony Campbell and Jesse Hertzstein. And Jesse Hertzstein is stepping down to do some deeper work with the Literacy Center of West Michigan as an executive board member. And so we'd just like to invite Kristen Brace up here, and we'd like to present him with a certificate of appreciation. If you could come up, and we could just give Jesse a round of applause for all of the work that he's done. Thank you, Jesse. And I can't forget, Kristen Brace, my program assistant, has been so amazing for the past 2 years. We couldn't have done any of this without her, so thank you, Kristen. Yeah. So with all of that out of the way, we are going to get into the agenda. We are going to hear a little bit about the coalition and some of the work that's being done in our community from coalition members, and then I'm going to present or introduce to you some of the leaders who are leading attendance efforts in our community.
I think for so long, literacy or illiteracy has been the dirty little secret of our community and other communities. And I think it's great that people are starting to talk about it and starting to recognize that it is a problem.
One of the biggest barriers I see in this community to literacy is simply motivation. When you read to children, children become naturally motivated to read.
Our children are experiencing adversity early in life, and the adversity, what I mean by that is homelessness, poverty, malnutrition, lack of maternal education.
Most of the families we work with come from Spanish-speaking countries, and they immigrated because of poverty. And they work long hours for low wages. Many do not speak English. Many are illiterate even in their native tongues because of lack of education in their home countries.
A lot of our residents either work 2 jobs or work the evening shift, so it's pretty difficult to get access for those hours. Also, we have printed materials that clearly they can't read.
So if we could turn the community around and create this culture of reading, when kids are very young. This culture of reading to them just for the fun of it, I'm sure that we could overcome some of the barriers, some of the problems we have with literacy in this community.
Once that fire is lit within our parents, they're thirsty for more.
Part of the education is responsibility of the school. The other part is our responsibility as a parents. I think it's a lot of work that we have to do together with the teachers, with principals, with our resources that we have for our kids. But the most important is focus that is not the 100% responsibility of the school, it's our responsibility.
I have faith in the schools because I have faith in parents. Parents that get involved with their children's education are more likely to have children that succeed in school. Choices are important too. Parents need to be able to choose schools that are related to or that would promote their child's talents and gifts. But the choice of schools is not important if the parent doesn't get involved.
I grew up in a single parent home. I also had to drop out of school, and in spite of the adversity, I was able to pursue my goals and my education and educate my own children because I had the support of the community and my family. So that's what brings me hope, knowing that if it happened with me, it'll happen with others.
Education is the best way for our residents to have a better life, to have access to better jobs.
I'm hopeful because we have a lot of organizations and institutions that are working towards a more literate community.
I'm involved in different committees, education committees, and when I saw them working so hard advocating for our childhood, starting from 0 to 5, that is the age the most important that we need advocating for our kids. And when I saw all these people working on the table and sitting and bringing their hours to organize how to can develop the plan for the future of these kids is when I think it's possible that our future can be succeed because we are working right now.
There are a lot of organizations in this community that have a heart for the children and have a heart to make sure that we close these achievement gaps by 2025, which is a great vision for the community. And without a vision, we perish.
Our community is very resilient. They're very hardworking people. Having access to education is the best way for them to climb up the socioeconomic ladder.
In this day and age of a shrinking middle class and an expanding income gap, I believe that education is really the only way to level the playing field, and that a quality education for all is what gives me hope for the future.
Grand Rapids is a giving community. I know we have the resources. I know we'll have the volunteers. I know we have everything that we need to solve the illiteracy problem in this community. If we just work together, I know we can do it. And with the Community Literacy Initiative pulling us all together and trying to get us to understand what the other organizations are doing, that's a great start for us to start working together.
So with that, we have the pleasure to hear about some of the great work that's being done in our community. I'm going to introduce to you all of the speakers today so that you don't have to hear me too many times, but we'll be having the superintendent of Grand Rapids Public Schools, Teresa Weatherall-Neal, program officer, believed to become Edmund Verley, and Carol Payne-McGovern of Kent School Services Network, speaking about some of the work they're doing around attendance support in our community. So please give them a warm welcome.
Good morning. It is so nice to see so many people in this community come out to talk about literacy, but the first step to literacy in the school system is attendance. And our children need to come to school so that they can understand this is a place where learning is happening. It's a great place to be. This initiative in the Grand Rapids Public Schools around attendance started actually a couple years ago. And we have so many children that we need to convince their parents that school is the place to be. Children don't get up and get themselves ready for school in the morning. So we need to work with the adults in this community. We have approximately 6,000 students during the past couple years that have missed more than 18 days. And that's pretty significant. Juan talked about the importance of education in his family. I have 9 brothers and sisters, and my mother could not wait. I can still hear her say, I can't wait for the school bells to ring. And so we just knew that was the place to be. Staying home wasn't an option. It was not an option. I don't know if that was because there were 9 of us or if it's because that was a place to be. But we knew the importance of education and going to school. And we are now in the Grand Rapids Public Schools creating that same environment where it is the place to be. It's a happening place. We want our children to be there. We have a group of administrators and principals that are working very hard around literacy, getting our libraries ready. Mrs. Evans and her team, they've done just a great job preparing our teachers to use the literacy centers that we have. And so I want you to know that this initiative around attendance, community literacy, is so important to everything that we do as we serve these 18,000 students, and we can't do it alone. These children live in this community. They are in school only about 25% of the day. The rest of the time, they belong to you all. They don't just belong to Grand Rapids Public Schools. And I can also speak on behalf of other superintendents because it is difficult for us as superintendents to do it alone. These are your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, your church members. We need you to ask children about school. Explain why it is so important. And we have a lot of young parents in this community, extremely young parents in the community. We need you to embrace these young people and explain to them the importance of coming to school every single day, on time and all day. I don't want you to lose that piece because when parents pick their children up early, they're missing out on important information. And so we are just very encouraged this year, working with our parents, and want to thank all of the parents for taking the lead to say, yes, this is in fact important. We mean to take this to the next level in the Grand Rapids Public Schools so that we will have all of our children in place. I want to thank this Community Literacy Center for taking this initiative on. Especially thank you to you for all the information, for all the years that you've worked. I followed you secretly for about the last 15 years. You know, I've worked in Title I for 31 years, and I've just always been really interested in children in poverty. And you've done great work, and I want to thank you. And I especially want to thank the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and Believe to Become, Doug and Maria DeVos. If there are important initiatives in this community, we have people that have taken on the charge to say, I will be in it with you. And it is because of that that I feel that we are not alone in this. Not just me, but other superintendents. It's never just about Grand Rapids. It is about this community. And we need to come together to take care of these small issues like attendance that will give us the big bang at the end of the day. Thank you.
And so we were happy to, when Superintendent Neal has talked about actually that these are our community's children, we were happy to kind of collaborate with Grand Rapids Public Schools on what is a campaign across the whole district called Making Every Day Count. We've been really honored to work with the Grand Rapids Public Schools Community and Student Services Office, and my partner in crime, Mel Atkins, is not able to be here today, but he stepped into Teresa's footsteps and really went gun-ho around the whole issue of community caring for their kids along with the school system. I'm just going to nod to you to change that. Or is there, oh, I'm sorry, there's a clicker here. Thank you. And so the whole idea is that, as Teresa has just said, is that students need to be in school, because that's where we really are able to help them unleash the potential. We know that every child has unlimited potential. We just need to go after it as a community. Sure, okay. Oops, I'm sorry. Grand Rapids Public Schools really has been looking at their data. Mel Atkins is a real data geek, and on August 19th, he really put forth to all of the administrators, all of the principals, all of the deans in the schools, this campaign that we had been collaborating on, and gave them, every school, their picture. We had been on many calls with Hedy Chang, and she had, of course, we were inspired by KSSN and their pre-work setting the ground for all of this. And so all 40-something schools really got what's called a school attendance tracking tool that really laid out where they were, what was their current reality. I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction here. So it was all based upon research. And the big what is, what Hedy talks about in her research, which I'm sure she's going to talk about today, is that there's 3 tiers to this work. And GRPS had a very robust recovery piece, the intervention pieces with folks like KSSN, their parent action leaders, with Believe to Become was in place. But this universal strategy that everybody could grab onto was one of the opportunities. And the setting that foundation so that we all are on the same page and are rowing in the same direction. And that's what we put together here. It kicks off with an attendance challenge in every school, and it kind of looks like this. Every school will have their attendance data. They will work with both internal staff and also their parent-teacher community councils. And this is really something that's really powerful, is that we're inviting parents and community along with principals and teachers to roll up their sleeves, look at the current reality, and really set forth a strong vision for the school and put together school improvement plans that we all can row in the same direction. The attendance challenge really sets forth that. Folks will end up seeing what they're setting a goal and then actually looking at how they're doing each month in terms of attendance, satisfactory attendance. It's a grade level challenge so we can get the kids to actually pressure each other and their parents to get to school. And we're excited about this groundwork that's happening. Teachers will increase their efforts to have more positive communications with families, so kids just don't go unnoticed. Most of us who are parents know that we love those times when we can get teachers telling us what's great about our kid, and so we're equipping everyone with the same message. Really, the strategy is this: recognizing attendance, as Hedy has talked about. Welcoming students, and then celebrating all of our growth in terms of attendance. And we believe that with this, that we can make every day count if the message for everyone is that every day counts. Being in school is what matters around success. So we're excited about the partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools, and are looking forward to really moving the needle on attendance.
Good morning, everyone. This morning I read about the most recent recipients of the MacArthur Genius Awards, and one of them is a woman who's a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, Angela Duckworth, who's going to be looking at the characteristics of grit and self-control and how they influence academic achievement. And I thought, wow, you know, we just never know what's going to bubble up next. And I thought back to kind of a historical little story for you in terms of attendance, because here we are today talking about attendance. And how did that become a real focus? I think as Juan's mentioned and Superintendent Weatherall-Neal's mentioned, you know, we've all grown up that you had to be in school, you had to be there every day. And so in this community about 2004, we began looking through the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council in terms of how do we best support students in this community, those students specifically in the most vulnerable neighborhoods, and help them break down the barriers that they're facing for their academic achievement. And really to realign existing services and add on and improve and enhance additional services and place those in the schools. And through that work, the Kent School Services Network evolved, which is now an initiative that is in 7 school districts, 27 schools, serving about 16,000 students this school year. And through those efforts, Andy Zylster was the director of Kent Department of Human Services at that time, and he started thinking about the whole attendance piece. You know, people that are working on welfare to work, and they need to be in their offices or in wherever they're working every day. Attendance matters when you work. What about students in schools? Attendance should matter if you're also in school. And so really started kind of looking at that. And that became a focus. And when we started Kent School Services Network in 2006, we had attendance and really looking at the piece on chronic absence as one of our impact indicators that we were going to evaluate over the 3 years. Simultaneously, Hedy released her report, Present, Engaged, and Accounted For in 2008 as well, and that really gave some validation to the efforts that we were putting in place in this community to say, hey, I think we're on the right track. This is something we really need to start measuring. In 2009, we had our first pilot evaluation report that showed that, yes, in the 8 schools that were part of our pilot in 3 different districts, 4 of those 8 schools really did improve in terms of chronic absence, which is missing over 10% of the school year. And then 3 of those 8 schools really did move the needle on extreme chronic absence, which was missing over 20%. So we were on to something. Through the partnerships we've gained across from county agencies to school districts and organizations like the Community Literacy Institute, we really started looking at how we as a community really can start looking at this attendance piece. Community Literacy Institute wrote the Community School Action Plan for the grade level reading campaign and really put together a lot of partners and really started talking even more about that at that point in time. 2011, the Kent Intermediate School District released an early chronic absenteeism report that really looked at first grade through third grader and all schools, elementary schools in the county, and what are we doing and how do we look, what is a snapshot, and really found that those students that were in the highest populated areas, urban areas, students of African American, Hispanic, and they were the ones that really had an issue with chronic absence. And so that even elevated it more. And through this time, we've been working with Hedy. And what we all enjoy so much about Hedy is it's all about data. So we have some data, we continue to look for data. But then what we do is we call up Hedy and we say, hey, Hedy, what else is going on? And during this time in 2010, Hedy then launched the Attendance Works organization and really was able to pull together leading practices going on across the country and really honing the work that's being done, but feeling like you're part of a collaborative. And if you're interested, to look at, we're doing this early childhood piece now. Well, let's get you in touch with Chicago because they just released a study. And that's been very interesting because it is data-driven. And as all of us are talking every day, that becomes the measure. And so we really do look at that attendance and looking at how we are moving the needle on that. So our relationship with Hedy has been ongoing over the years. We've enjoyed working with her. We continue to look for other opportunities to collaborate and partner with her. And the grade level reading campaign was very excited because we did get an attendance Pacesetter Award in 2011 for the work that's been done in the schools over the past 7 years. And I think it is really a privilege to have her here, to return back to Kent County. She was actually in Ann Arbor last week, to return back to Michigan. She's getting a real feel for the culture and climate of the work that we're doing here. And I think one thing to really illustrate that work is that this past February, she was honored with the White House Champions of Change for her efforts in education excellence for African Americans. And I really don't need to say anything further. You're all here to hear what she has to say, but I will say Hedy is someone that we will continue to partner with. She brings her enthusiasm and her critical eye on data and her knowledge of what's going on and capacity to pull us all together to make a difference in the lives of those children that aren't showing up for school every day and change their lives. Hedy?
It is such a pleasure to be here. I really do think of Grand Rapids and Kent County as one of those places where I've grown up in this work together. In 2006, I will admit I started this project as a consulting project for the Annie Casey Foundation for Ralph Smith. I had no idea I would become the attendance maven for the country. It was not in my career plan. But yet here I am. And my kids are like, could you find another job? Sometimes we don't want to have to go to school, you know. But they know how far that gets them. In any case, you know, first of all, I just do want to say thank you so much because in this work you have to have places and people that you can learn together with, that you can try out ideas. Sometimes they work really well. Sometimes they don't work quite so well. What I promise to people in my work is I can never promise perfection. What I will promise you is a deep commitment to learning what we could have done better and how we can improve it. And I am so glad my associate director, Cecilia, has been couching me. Don't call them guinea pigs, Hedy. Don't call them guinea pigs. they're innovation partners. And I am so pleased that years later, all of you here are still willing to be innovation partners with Attendance Works. What I'd actually like to do, though, is start this off by a little exercise. So I need 3 volunteers. I promise I won't bite. 3 volunteers. You'll get a little exercise. Please come down over here. And so, and I'd actually like you guys to stand here in a row, facing that direction. So once we get whoever the first 3 are, we'll go with that. Okay, no. We're gonna not in a sort of parallel. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do my quick techie. Stop the PowerPoint for a moment. By the way, you all know. Oh, thank you. Here's a better method. I also want to say Marty's one of my innovation partners here. Thank you for coming down. All right. So I know Marty's name, but your name is Pam and Sharon. Okay. So Marty, Pam, and Sharon, they are 5 years old. They all just started kindergarten. But I'm actually going to ask you guys, Marty, can you guys move just, this laterally towards me. No, you still face that way, but just, I'm sorry, this is one of those directions. I'm just making sure no one walks into a plant, okay? So, Marty, Pam, and Sharon are 5 years old, and this is their first day of kindergarten. We're all excited, yay! But So what we're going to talk about right now is how ready they are for really learning and taking advantage of kindergarten. And unfortunately, Marty here, Marty didn't get to go to preschool. Parents couldn't find it, never even had that chance. So Marty, I need you to take 8 steps backwards, please. Those are representing 8 months of learning, 9 months of learning that she would have gotten had she gone to preschool. Pam here, she went to preschool, but you know what happened? She just couldn't get there very often. It was really tough. And after a while, they actually gave her slot to another family that might actually use it more often. But Pam, can you take 4 steps back? She only got kind of partial benefit of preschool. But Sharon here, she's ready to learn, all right. And because Superintendent Neal's been there, we've got great kindergarten teachers, lots of people. We have a great year of kindergarten. They've all engaged. So can you all take 8 steps forward? Because we have some great teaching. Sharon, you also, everyone gets 8 steps forward. Because they got a great set of learning in kindergarten, right? But you know what? What happened here? Both Marty and Pam, actually, one of the challenges is they just never got into the habit of going to kindergarten regularly. So Marty here, you know, she was actually missing like 20% of kindergarten, you know, a lot of school. Can you take 3 steps back? Because she didn't even get the full benefit of kindergarten. And you know what happened? Pam had the same situation. She never even learned the habit of kind of getting to school regularly in preschool. And so can you take 3 steps back again? And then we get to the summer. And unfortunately, during the summer, Marty didn't have a chance to be in anything. She couldn't, those literacy programs, they were around, but somehow her family missed them. And so when she got to school in 1st grade, she had not only not kept up with where she was last year, but take another step back. I'm sorry, Marty. She actually came, you know, even less prepared. Now we're going to all take, but I forgot. Sharon over here, she went to a great literacy program in the summer. She was so excited. She kept reading. You know what? It was one of those moments she not only kept up with where she was, she actually progressed one more step forward. And now we're in 1st grade. Okay, I'm not going to do this because we're going to run Sharon into the chairs. But they could all take another 8 steps forward because they got a great 1st grade teacher, right? In any case, we can stop now before we run Sharon into the chairs. If you imagine this continuing by 3rd grade, who's reading by 3rd grade? Thank you so much. So what I get to do today is to share with you a bit about what we are learning from communities across the country, and it is one of the joys of my life that I get to continue to learn and sort of pull together the knowledge so as a country we can try to move forward together, because I have to tell you, this stuff is not rocket science, and we do not have to reinvent the wheel. We will get farther if we can learn from each other. Oops. That not work? Huh. That did not work. Okay. I'm realizing we have occasionally had a fonts issue, and I'm wondering if we are having one. All right. We will get you a great PowerPoint. We're missing some of the, let me see how I can, I'm going to be, you know, resilient. And so we'll just go back to this slide here for a second. I'm going to actually start by defining attendance terms. And we will get you a PowerPoint, and this will be clear. But hopefully this will not be too hard to to forget, but we actually have, I want to talk about 3 attendance terms. And even though this sounds really dry and boring, I feel like I need to do this because what I've found in wherever I am in the country is that if I don't clarify terms, I can be in a room, we think we're talking about the same thing, and we're actually not talking about the same thing. So one term is average daily attendance. How many of you guys know or heard the term average daily attendance? And by the way, this is important if you're a community partner, because if you go into a school or your school district and you say, I want to know what your attendance is, you need to know your terms because they'll give you different data pieces. And part of what equips you to be a good partner is for you to be able to ask the right questions and to understand the data when you get it. So average daily attendance is really the, it's the percentage of kids who show up to school any day, right? Or each day on average. So if you have 200 kids who are enrolled in a school, 190 show up, you have a 95% average daily attendance. It's kind of a capacity building measure. It's used in my state of California, where I live, for funding, because it shows you how many desks or books do you need in order to make sure that given how many kids you think are going to show up, you have enough resources for them, right? Then there's another measure, and the other measure is truancy. And truancy, and this is one of those things that I've been learning a lot more about in Michigan the last couple weeks, truancy is actually usually defined as unexcused absences. And I think it almost conjures up this idea of kids skipping school, right? They're missing school without an excuse. Exactly how much skipping school is considered truancy can vary a lot. In most places, according to the federal government, it's actually defined at the state level because we have to track for No Child Left Behind and report on the number of kids who are missing school. And for that purpose, in Michigan, you actually report 10 days unexcused is what you report as truancy. But truancy is not just a reporting mechanism to the federal government. It's usually a mechanism, it's sort of a trigger for when do you want to start to take action, because there's something called state compulsory ed laws, which require kids, mandate kids to go to school. And if a kid's truant, it means that you are going to start to track that child, because eventually you may take them to court if necessary. Usually it's a last resort, but at some point you're using the legal system to make sure kids show up to school, right? In my state of California, so the one thing you should know though is it varies incredibly by different places and states. In my state of California, actually any 3 days a kid is missing school without a valid excuse is considered a truant child. That's what we report, as opposed to your 10 days. And as soon as that happens, in my state, this is state law, you get a notification of truancy, and the parent does, so that I would know if my kid was missing school and I need to take action as a parent. If it happens 3 times, you're supposed to have a student attendance review team at the site level. If that happens and it still doesn't improve, then you can go to a student attendance review board, and you actually have, that's where the courts start getting involved. It's a very clear procedure. One thing and we're actually a county-driven state, but I've realized now in Michigan that I didn't really know county-driven until I got to Michigan, or local-driven. In Michigan, you all actually don't have a statewide definition of how much unexcused absence should trigger legal action. That is a completely locally district-defined decision about what triggers legal action. Now, I can understand that on some levels because you want to have local authority. On the other hand, I think that makes for a lot of confusion, because if people move across districts, teachers or kids, there's nothing clear about exactly, well, how does that process begin? And you can't even create a common training manual across the state because everything completely varies. So I just wanted to, and so if you're in any district, because I know you guys have different districts in Kent County, you're going to have to find out for each district, what is your definition of truancy? When do you trigger action? How does that happen? Does it change over time? I just want to say that is an opportunity and a real challenge in your work. So just think there's average daily attendance, There's truancy, which is unexcused absences, and then there's chronic absence, which is what we talk about as at what point do we know a kid has missed so much school that they actually could be academically at risk? Because regardless of the reason, when you miss school, you're missing a day of instruction, right? And so at some point, those days add up. And what I want to be clear about is that you have to understand that these three different measures because they actually don't mean the same thing. So a lot of times when I go to a superintendent or I go to a principal and I say, well, you might have an attendance challenge, they say, oh, no, I have a 95% average daily attendance. We're fine. But you actually don't know. So let me figure that. You can actually have 20 or 30% of your kids chronically absent and still have a 95% average daily attendance. And let me explain this. So you get that goes back to that scenario. 200 kids, right? 10 empty seats on one day. They are not the same 10 kids sitting in those 10 empty seats day after day. If they they would be disenrolled. The question is it all 200 kids in that school, each missing 9 days? Let's say it's a 180-day school year. But most kids don't all miss an equal amount of school, right? Usually you have some kids who miss a lot more and some kids who miss a lot less. Well, what if you have 60 kids who are usually in those 10 empty seats? They're still showing up enough, otherwise they'd be disenrolled. But they each together have missed, let's say, 20 days. And you'll still have absences left over. This is one of those math challenges. It's one of those, math riddles. And so the problem is, if you, yay, magic. Can I take you with me everywhere I go? Sorry. So this is giving you an example. These are schools, 6 schools in Oakland, California, where I do a lot of, they benefit because they're only a Bay Bridge away from me. And they, can see this is real data. One had 7%, one had 16% chronic absence. And this is New York City data, where once they were at 90%, and this is our challenge, we always think 90%'s an A. But you know what? In attendance land, 90% isn't an A. 90% is usually a fifth of your kids, 1 out of 5, missing so much school they're academically at risk. And you know what? When you have that much churn, it is affecting the education of all the kids in the classroom. Because the teacher's trying to figure out, and it's not like the kids who miss all say, oh, we'll just be gone on Monday so then you can repeat that lesson. They're on different days of the week. And one of those things, you have this debate around, I hear this, oh, well, we can't worry about attendance because we're focused on the Common Core and Common Core implementation. Well, first of all, Common Core, as far as I know it, is about even more active learning in the classroom, even better instruction, which is really hard for families to make up for if the kid's not there. And so the better your instruction, the greater the consequences for a child. But I also want to say, there may be some times where if you have too much churn in a classroom, my sister is a teacher, so I've been schooled now how to appreciate teachers. She may try really, really hard. She may be a great teacher, but if she has constant churn, she's having to slow down instruction, and some of those kids are getting bored. It's not, so it affects instruction. There's an interplay between instruction and between attendance, and we got to look at the two together. What we found looking at 3 different districts is if you had 98% average daily attendance at a school level, you probably had a very small chronic absence problem. If you had 93%, you usually had 15 to 20% or more. At 95%, I just don't know. And again, I just say this to you because I know you're a lot of community members. When you go into districts and you say, we want to talk to you about attendance, and they say, no, We don't have an attendance problem. I can't tell you how many places I've went to that didn't have an attendance problem. You got to find out what measures they're looking at, and usually they are not looking at chronic absence. We co-invented, you guys get to share this. We invented this term starting around 2006, 2007, and as we've grown up, this has not been a term in use or a data point. Part of the issue is that when we started this work, I think most districts were still taking attendance paper and pencil. When you take paper and pencil, it's hard to aggregate up from individual kids. This is why people looked at consecutive absences. They had other kinds of ways. But I feel like student SIN systems are like my little iPhone here. It has a lot of capacity, and I am always perplexed about how to use its capacity. And I don't even know, my kids tell me, Mommy, there's an app, you can download the app, it'll do it for you. And I'm like, how do you get the app? What motivates me to download the app? You know, and I kind of think we actually, Grand Rapids is using our quote app, our district and student attendance tracking tool. That's my version of an app. But I haven't gotten most districts to download the app yet. So the other thing is to know about truancy, which is truancy is unexcused absences. And this is from my own San Francisco school district, which I have to say, I have a parent in the public schools. And yesterday, my school district passed at the school board a proclamation for September Attendance Awareness Month and making sure that they have ongoing work. My superintendent's built it into his his personal report card. I'm so excited. It took me actually, it took longer to get my school district going than one would think it would have, but they're totally there now. When I first started, I was a parent, not quite just wherever it was. You're never a prophet in your own land. Although now my school district really does talk to me. In any case, what you'll notice when we first, this is actually the first time I got my own school district to crunch the data. And this is 10 unexcused absences, so the same as what you guys track for No Child Left Behind here. Look at the data on the kindergartners. If you used 10 unexcused absences as your measure for identifying kids at risk, you identified half the kindergartners than you would if you looked at chronic absence. And that's because kindergartners don't sit there and go, oh, I think I'm going to skip school today. It's just not what's happening. There are lots of reasons why kindergartners miss school. They're anxious about school. They're nervous about school. Oh, Mommy, I've got a stomach ache. And it comes in as a call. Mom has a challenge, can't get to the school. It decides, you know what, it's just easier to keep you to school. Or your older sibling gets school, but the kid can't walk to school. There are lots of reasons kids miss school in kindergarten. They may not have to miss school, but they come in as excused absences because adults know about them. And this is New York data. They actually were looking at kids for child welfare purposes. And they had an awful case of a little girl named Nixberry Brown who was, and this was triggered years ago because she was found dead in her basement and everyone said, well, where were the schools? Didn't anyone notice? So they created a whole system. Any 10 consecutive absences or 20 days over a 40-day period, teachers had to go and find out, is there something going on that we need to know about? Because usually teachers are the first line of defense. You have more daily contact, teachers do, with a kid than anyone else outside of their family members. So that red line below was if you looked at their 407 alerts. Maybe it was good for utilizing to figuring out if there was a family issue where there might be family endangerment, but it wasn't finding out who were the kids at academic risk because of missing too much school. Because absences aren't consecutive. They happen one every day, 2 weeks. You know, it's not always consecutive. And if you look at, this is the classic curve, by the way, I'll just point out, my staff calls it the Nike swoosh. You know, it goes down, goes up. And usually you have this high levels of chronic absence in kindergarten. If you ever look at Grand Rapids data, you guys have the exact same curve. Middle school depends a little bit on middle school transition because transition years are always harder. often you have this bump in ninth, and then you have weird stuff that happens at the end, depending on what's happening with dropout. Because sometimes if kids are dropping out a lot, you actually have an apparent improvement, but it's actually that the worst attenders are actually gone from the systems. And by the way, so New York City was amazed to find it was 1 out of 5 kids, elementary kids citywide, and it was 1 out of 3 in the highest poverty schools. So this is a national crisis, and no one's noticed it. It's a silent one, because we haven't been looking at the data. We think it's at least 10% of the kids, maybe 15%, 7.5 million kids in this country. We know lots of places where it's as high as 1 out of 4, and it is as high as it's higher than that in a number of cities that I'm working in, particularly the highest poverty cities. But it's a red alert. Now, this is your own data. You know that chronic early absence is pretty high here. This is across your districts. Not true in every single one of your districts, but you've got quite a few districts where you've got over 10% of your kids, and this is just 1st through 3rd grade. This is a little bit old data, but I think it gives you a picture of what's been here in Kent County. By the way, this is why this kind of data is part of why this is part of the campaign for grade level reading, because they really see this as that strategy where if, and I want to reemphasize what Superintendent Neal said, this is not a schools alone solution. This is a schools and community together solution, and what I think the campaign for grade level reading is a call is for schools and for us to not blame anyone. This isn't about blaming anyone. This is about recognizing our shared responsibility and finding the opportunities to realize what we can do. And schools and communities together can deal with that walking exercise that I have is actually sort of covering all 3 of these, can change that readiness gap, change the attendance gap, change the summary slide. Well, I totally believe we have to improve classroom instruction. It will not be sufficient if these 3 challenges continue to exist. What we know is that chronic absence starts to matter even as starting as early as pre-K. And that's something that I think is a complete surprise. And Carol mentioned it when she mentioned University of Chicago just has released the best research that exists right now looking at pre-K absences. And look at it. If you were chronically absent every single year in pre-K, K, 1st, and 2nd, by 2nd grade, you are requiring intensive levels of reading intervention. And every single, it's like a stair step. Every single year of absence, the lower your scores are. One thing I will just say, this is one of those issues where the kids who were most affected by absences were actually in pre-K, in terms of their school readiness, were the kids who were the least ready in the first place. So when they didn't show up, their reading assessments went even farther down faster. When they did show up, they actually improved. There's some great research which shows kindergarten pre-K can be a leveler. It can help to reduce the achievement gap. But guess what? You got to show up in order for it to work. And the challenge is that low-income kids who need it the most often get it the least. And it's also because where do you think low-income kids learn to read? In school, right? Their parents are often low-income because they themselves aren't that highly literate. If they were really highly literate, they might not be low income. They would have had a better job. So they depend so much on school. We know from California data, you got to look at this data and follow it over time. If kids were chronically absent in kindergarten and 1st, the chances of reading at grade level at the end of 3rd grade were very slim. If the kids showed up, not most of the time, they much higher percentages. I wanted to say a couple things about this. I do think, that first bar, the 64% shows, it is true that just showing up does not guarantee you'll be reading. More has to happen in the classroom. On the other hand, not showing up is a pretty good indication that the classroom instruction is not going to help you read, right? And then people ask me sometimes, they say, well, are you saying that if it's all just about attendance? I'm not saying it's all just about attendance. But what other measure do we have to know that we have a kid who needs our help? We take this measure every single day. We can know and monitor any point in a school year. So it's not saying that the only support they need is to show up and then they'll read. There may be other things going on, but it may be our best, quote, early warning indicator that this is a kid who really needs extra help if we're going to break out a two-generation. My life has been dedicated to two-generation approaches to moving families out of poverty. This is a pretty key sign that it's not happening. And we know here in Kent County, chronic absence is associated with lower achievement. If you want to look, not that everyone has to replicate the same research over and over again. I have yet to find one that has contradicted our findings, but you have your own data to prove it. And again, the challenge is, so we saw from national data that chronic absence in kindergarten, this is a sample of 20,000 kids from across the country, predicts lower fifth grade attendance. But let me point something out. This predicts it even when your third grade attendance improves. It's almost a pernicious effect. It's a lasting effect. You miss kindergarten, you miss first grade, even though your attendance improves. Remember the New York slide? Kids' attendance generally gets better in second, third, fourth. Even if your attendance improves, if you missed too much time, you can show up into the classrooms as you get older and you can still be behind. You're physically there, but you're not caught up. And so by fifth grade, the impact is still lasting. And the challenge is low-income kids are 4 times more likely to be chronically absent. This is a partial explanation of why you have high levels here in Grand Rapids. You're a high-poverty school district. And low-income kids are more likely to face those types of challenges: poor transportation, lack of access to health care, unaffordable housing and mobility that leads you to be chronically absent multiple years in a row. What we saw in Oakland is we wanted to understand, well, what happens, how does elementary school connect to middle school outcomes? And we saw some pretty troubling data. We saw that when kids were chronically absent 1 year, just first grade, if you're chronically absent in first grade, if you watch those kids over time, 6 years later, those same chronically absent first graders were 6 times more likely than a child who had not been chronically absent to be chronically absent again for 6th grade. They had lower test scores and they had higher suspension rates. If you were 2 years, 7, almost 8 times, 3 years of chronic absence anytime during elementary school, you had 18 times higher levels of chronic absence in 6th grade. There are kids who fall off the bandwagon, if you will, the pathway to success in 6th grade. They did okay in middle school, in elementary school, something happens to them in middle school, and so it's actually an early sign at that time that you got to engage them. But I think the kids who are the hardest to reach, the most expensive to bring back in middle school, are actually the kids we lost in kindergarten and first grade, because they've now been a couple years behind for most of their elementary career, and we wonder why they might be a behavior problem. Or maybe there were underlying behavior issues, challenges, trauma in their life that's both affecting behavior and affecting classroom attendance because things are so tough. But we didn't reach out when we had an early warning sign that if we had supported them, everything about intervention, all we know is that the earlier you identify the issues, the greater the chance you can help a kid to bounce back. This is Utah data, which shows, by the way, by middle and high school, it doesn't matter income. If a kid is not showing up in middle and high school, it is a sign that they are disengaging from school. Dropout does not, for most kids, occur instantaneously. Dropout is a slow process. And guess what? The first sign that your kid may be disengaging from school is they start to miss and skip classes. So we know, this is Utah data, any kid between 8th and 12th grade who was chronically absent had a 3 times greater likelihood of dropping out by the end. 2 years, 50% of those kids dropped out. But we're not using data that we have at our fingertips to figure out how to intervene and turn the situation around. And we know this is a huge achievement gap issue. This is in Oakland again. And you look at the African American levels of chronic absence, and what we see is that chronic absence is so much higher. Almost 25% of the African American kindergartners. Now, I want to say a couple things about this issue, though. There may be almost a quarter of those kids chronically absent who are African American, but there are 75% of the African American kids who are not chronically absent in Oakland. So one thing I want to say is you cannot use race to ever predict. You can't even use class. There's lots of low-income kids who still get themselves to school. The best predictor of chronic absence, okay, this is really not that hard. What do you think is the best predictor of chronic absence? Chronic absence. You know, this is Carol says I am. The thing I'm constant about is being data-driven. We can't use assumptions. We can't use we need to just use chronic absence to figure out, you know, who's at risk. And in Oakland, by the way, we know this is a combination of things. I think it's a combination of race and class. If I look at where those kids who are African American and chronically absent, they're located in West Oakland and this corridor all along to East Oakland. West Oakland is a really high poverty neighborhood, which I don't know how many of you guys know anything about the Bay Area, but this used to be a military army base. And then it used to be where there was, we actually managed to cut up the community with a freeway. And then when we had the Loma Prieta earthquake in '89, it pancaked and we got rid of it. But okay, maybe we got rid of the thing that divided the community, but then we left a lot of environmental hazards behind, as happens in those situations. So when you look at asthma data and connect it to where the chronic absence levels are, you look at community violence data, they're all there. The kids who are African American who are in the Hill schools, which is the more affluent area, they're not chronically absent. So it's this combination of these two things going on. I also think there's a challenge that happens in all of our low-income schools, which is that almost by definition, the people who work in low-income schools are, at least at this point in their lives, not low-income themselves anymore. And often they don't live in those neighborhoods because they're tough neighborhoods to live in. So what it means is when teachers, staff go into those schools, they don't necessarily know what's happening with those kids. A kid falls asleep or doesn't show up. Do they ask why, or do they make assumptions about why? And are there assumptions based on what's happening with those kids? Sometimes it's hard. There's a disconnect between our understanding of realities, between the staff and who the kids are. And so I have to say, we do have in Oakland both an over-suspension issue, and we tried to sort out class and race, and there were still somewhat higher levels of chronic absence, even across issues of race, because I think people make assumptions, and then they go into punitive action versus support when we make assumptions. But it's not a simple race issue, it's a class issue. It's a complicated set of different realities where we don't use the data to ask questions. So the key to solving chronic absence is asking questions. And what we do find, though, is that it's helpful to have sort of buckets of understandings of why kids might be absent, and because this helps organize your thinking, and it also helps you ask the right questions. Sometimes the issue are these myths that absences are only a problem if they're unexcused. It's like we think about absences. You got to go to school because you got to comply with state compulsory ed, or you got to go to school because you're listening to me as a parent. So, for example, if I said, oh, my son Neil, you know, Neil, if Neil skipped school, he's 15, that's a problem. Didn't tell me. If I said, Neil, oh, you've been you play baseball, he does. You've been tired, just go ahead today, take a mental health day, then that's not a problem. When in fact, it's still a missed day of instruction. When we think about attendance is equaling opportunity to learn, and absence is that absence of an opportunity to learn, then it's not just unexcused absences that matter. This issue of sporadic, this issue of doesn't matter young. But then there are these issues of barriers, lack of access to healthcare that I mentioned, and then aversion. And I will say among older kids. And sometimes, I don't know, this is one of those things I think it's worth exploring. How much has zero tolerance laws affected what's happened around school discipline for younger kids? Because if we are, and you can use your data to figure this out. Look at how many absences are due to suspensions. There was a district that I was working in. Their suspensions at high school, their chronic absence rates started increasing in high school, and so were their suspensions. And I said to the superintendent, you're going to have to unpack this. Because my other worry is that when kids feel that they've been suspended unfairly, they're not just going to miss the day that they were told stay out of school. They may stop showing up for the other days because they thought that was unfair. And that's their way of, especially teenagers. Sure, I'll show you, We've also seen, this is something, our tool doesn't do this yet, but you can do it pretty easily. Actually, in Oakland, our principals asked to look at chronic absence by grade level. We were able to do it more easily at the elementary level because you don't have period attendance. So you can see by first grade teachers, by second grade teachers, what are their chronic absence levels. The variations are sort of astonishing at times. Like I've been in a school where when we had most of the higher levels of chronic absence in kindergarten, but half of them were concentrated in 1 out of the 5 kindergarten teachers. I get different explanations. One time the explanation was that this kindergarten teacher is the one that all the parents are terrified of their kids being placed with because they think she's not very good and should have retired a long time ago. Another time, I got told by the principal, I think I have mold in that classroom. I'm like, oh, let's figure that one out. Another time, I think it was actually like a second grade class, the parent told me, my daughter's in that classroom and the issue is there's a bully and the teacher can't handle him and all the other kids keep showing up with stomach aches because they're so anxious. So, again, even for teachers, I've asked teachers, I said, what would make you feel that we could start building this data point in for you? They said, if you don't make assumptions about it, but you use it, do I need professional development? Do I need help with my classroom management? Do I have if we use this data to inquire about what's going on so we can help people, people are fine with looking closely at the data as long as we use it appropriately. We talk about kids going to school as a matter of hope, faith, and capacity. It's hope for a better future. When I hear the stories that were just even shared this morning, our superintendent, the head of this college, your parents had hope. They had a hope. They knew their kids. This is my dream for my kids. It's a dream that keeps everyone in this country, by the way. My kids can at least have as good of a future, if not a better one, right? You have to have hope for the future, and then you got to have faith that putting my child in this institution with this teacher is going to get me to that better future. And then you have to have the capacity, whether it's the knowledge that absences can add up, whether it's the transportation to get there. And we have to know when absences happen, where is it breaking down? So if, for example, you've got a parent who's got a kid in a school on the other side of town because she wanted to get that kid to the better school, but she has to wake up really early in the morning and take 3 buses to get that kid there. And there are parents who do this all across the country, but those buses keep breaking down. And if the school then in their attendance policy notices that that kid's not making it, goes to that parent and says, why don't you care about your kid's education? You can't get them here on time? You've missed so many days? You will break that parent's faith that you care about that child and their future. And I think you're going to not actually get to where you need them to be. I have to say, I love, and I credit to Shanae, the little cards, the I missed you cards, that is beautiful. Because that's what helps people have faith. That they're in, and at the level of kids and teachers, it's actually faith in your teacher. You and your kid have to have faith that that teacher, particularly when kids are little. I know that I also have to think hard. We had this conversation yesterday. I've been here for a day, so there's a lot that's really, really going on that fits with everything I know is good practice in Grand Rapids. So I'm still struck with this question. The data is showing it's not working. What is it that's not working? Now, one possibility, but I'm not sure, can be, I don't know if because you guys have a really tough economic situation. I don't know how much is true in the other districts around, but whether there's issues of trauma and community violence that are also underlying. Because when I think about this issue of hope, in communities that are most traumatized is where I worry that you have the least hope. Because I know, so in San Francisco, this is again my own school district, chronic absence is pretty low district-wide. It's about 8%. But in the public housing projects where we've started to work, it's 53%. So, and I've spent time with survivors of violence in those projects. And I know that when my friends have had their kids shot, survived, or shot and killed, the hope part is pretty tough to maintain. But what I also know is that when I find the survivors who figured out the personal strength to turn it around, they become the inspiring stories of hope that keep hope in their community. I have a friend, colleague, Ms. Jackson, who, man, she has this little child care center across from the projects, and Ms. Jackson is a bastion of hope for that community. She and her son are constantly working with young people. And so when you start to think about, well, how am I going to do this? I know it's not schools and alone on this one. She's not in the schools. It's her and her son who helped to illustrate for kids, because Drew got shot, and he keeps doing this work. He got shot, he was in the hospital, and Ms. Jackson was running around trying to make sure the kids didn't engage in retribution. But now that they've stayed with this, they are the stories of hope that keep kids in their community going to school. So this is also why we need all of us working together. I'm so glad that your clergy, you've got folks in congregations thinking about this, because this is time when the Spirit matters. And this is how we can keep people having hope, faith, and capacity. What we know at the school level, though, because this is just not rocket science, and this is something that, again, I think KSSN has illustrated, but what we've seen is in communities across the country, when people engage in these activities, they recognize good and improved attendance. They engage students and parents in knowing about the importance of monitoring attendance, knowing what's happening educationally. I saw Lindsay doing this when she said, so if you guys don't show up for lunch, this is what you're gonna miss. I see that technique, Lindsay, I recognize it. But this is what you have to do for parents. They need to know what their kids are missing in order to know that their kids are going to show up to school. So this is engaging kids in their education, parents in their education, knowing what's happening and knowing why missing school matters. One of my favorite things that, and I know this happens here at Kent County, but I do think, for example, that whole idea of a walking school bus is a great way of both engaging and educating, because you do the walking school bus, you can talk about it. Well, why do we have to have a walking school bus? Because we have to get kids to school every day. Well, it matters because of blah, but also you, community members, you parents, you can help get kids to school every day. That's a really fabulous way, because it's not only that it's not schools alone, but we have to find community in all its forms helping us to get kids to school. This is not going to be, we're not going to social work out, use social workers. We don't have the money for enough social workers to change this challenge. It's about the fabric of community that everyone helps and works together and is engaged in mutual support to get our kids to school. As a parent of kids, I can't tell you, who is also on the road, I can't tell you how much I depend on other parents to help me out when I can't get my kids to places because I'm not physically there. We have to create those bonds of trust among parents because they need that community. But we also need the data, and this is what is so exciting, I think. I think other school districts are starting to do this. I'm looking at Carol for confirmation, but I know that that's part of this plan from Grand Rapids, because we need to engage in personalized early outreach. And if it is kind of hard for parents to notice when kids, remember, missing 10% of the school year is only 2 or 3 days every single month. It is really easy for that to add up when they're sporadic. So what you have to do is as soon as kids start missing 2 or 3 days, and you start to notice a troubling pattern each month, you need to be able to outreach to those families. One, just to make sure, do you realize it's adding up? Maybe by just building that awareness, they'll change their behavior. But also because they know someone cares. But it also might give you information. In Providence, when they started doing personalized early outreach, they found out these parents were actually all working the night shift. The reason why their kids weren't getting to school is the parents were falling asleep before they could get their kids to school. And so what the solution was, which gets to that E, programmatic response, was they had to create an early morning breakfast club so parents could drop their kids off at school before they would go home and fall asleep exhausted from their night jobs. In other cases, I've seen it where actually the issue is there's a lot of asthma, and the parents actually don't trust the school to know what to do if their kid has an asthma attack. So the parents trying to decide what's more important, making sure the kid's with me so I know they're not going to, be in trouble when they have an asthma attack, or sending them to school. Now, that does not have to be the choice if parents knew how schools were prepared and the schools were truly prepared. But this is why you need to be monitoring the attendance data in practice. We are not going to solve everything by one-on-one solutions. This requires some programmatic action. And that's where I think we fall so short often. I was talking with Fiona, who's been great wandering around. She's a history major. I said, this country is shaped by its history of rugged individualism. We always think everything's solved individually, but we have to, as a country, realize sometimes that is not the way. Sometimes it requires programmatic solutions, but this is where the data combined with insights gained from parents, combined with insights from our community agencies, that's what can help us. That's why if you have councils that can look at the data and talk about why kids are not showing up, that's what will get you to these new solutions. And this really, really is about having this tiered approach. Shanae mentioned that I would come back to this again, and I am. And what I think is hard is in city after city, most places have only invested in recovery. That's because we've looked at truancy, so we don't notice the issues until they're very serious, and because we rely upon legal intervention, which frankly is the most costly, lawyers are costly, solution to resolving this issue. And we didn't. And then our courts are overwhelmed. One of my strongest partners in Alameda County, this is outside of Oakland, it's the county encompassing Oakland in California, is the deputy DA because she wants to reduce the overflow of kids who are ending up in her court system. She wants to use her court system in a positive way and legal intervention properly, but she knows that the only way we can get it is when we can make sure we're not having kids, not get the message, not learn attendance, and then also making sure with the early outreach we're intervening earlier so that we can make sure, if at all possible, we can use the least costly means before we go to the courts as a solution. You can also use your data, by the way, to figure out two things. You can both figure out which schools really, really need help And you can also figure out which schools are positive outliers. This is the part that I love about my job, which is you go to the schools that have lots of low-income kids, and you find out, but they have low levels of chronic absence, and you find out what they're doing. I tell you, they almost always are doing something around those 5 things that I mentioned earlier, but everyone has different ways of doing them, and you can be inspired and learn from that. I want to tell you about some district-wide efforts that are sort of my inspiring, because I also now look for districts that have places that have been able to do this. In Los Angeles, which I will say is a beast in and to itself, it's got 700,000 kids. But they used their data district-wide and figured out it was kindergarten and 9th graders that had the worst attendance. And then they looked for the schools with the highest levels of kindergarten and 9th grade, and they looked for principals who wanted to be do the work in this AIP. I don't think they had the principal selection in the beginning. They just found those places, and then they outstationed attendance improvement counselors who were aimed at building the capacity of the whole school to really engage in tracking the data, doing incentives, reaching out to kids, creating a culture of attendance. It's not that they were assigned to go do case management. They were assigned to help build the capacity of the school to do the work. And in their first year of operations, they had a 13% reduction. They defined chronically absent slightly earlier. They actually, one of my early, this argument, when we got to 10% didn't quite get there when LA was doing this. But they had a reduction in kindergarten of 13% chronic absence, and in 9th grade of 5% across their 77 schools. It actually produced the reduction school-wide in these 77 schools that were participating. This is in the very first, just 1 year of intervention. What I love is unpacking Deborah Eduardo, who's the head of student support services, decided that as her part of getting a PhD, she would actually go and figure out what was working. And she took schools that were in the program, she took schools that were not implementing so well and schools that were implementing well. They had the same supports, but some did better and some didn't have as great of gains. And this is what she found were the differences. One, she said, was that the schools that were better implementers took a strength-based approach. She was actually kind of amazed at what she heard. She said the schools that weren't doing very well, they kept saying things like, our parents don't care. They couldn't see any strengths. Whereas the schools that were succeeding, even though their kids' parents were in poverty, they could see their parents were trying, they could see there was a strength in there, they could build upon and leverage that. And they had higher levels of parent engagement generally in their schools. They also had a shared belief in those schools that this wasn't just something that was the responsibility of the school social worker. This was everyone's responsibility. Teachers had a part in this, social workers, the principals, custodians, whoever's in that school has a role in helping around attendance. And they had deeper levels of commitment to when they saw kids chronically absent, to diving into what were the causes and then engaging in creative problem solving. And they had school leadership that really explicitly made this a priority. That's what made the difference. These were all schools that had the same attendance improvement counselors sitting in them, but in some places they were able to make a difference more than others. In New Britain, this is just to give you hope, you can move this. New Britain had started working on this. We helped them, similar to yours, to crunch their data. They did a series of really investing in principal leadership so that all of the principals were seeing their own data reports, engaged in this work, thinking about this work. We actually spent some time finding out their bright spots and learning what they were doing and having those principals serve as inspiring examples to each other. Principals listen more sometimes to other principals. They started producing data every 2 weeks. They had school attendance teams in place at every single school. They actually hired extra outreach workers for kindergarten. They decided that was because they had high levels of kindergarten absences. And as a school, their community foundation, their whole grade level reading campaign, this is a grade level reading, they started engaging in kind of positive messaging. This is last year, at the end of 1 year of doing this work from the beginning to the end. You got to start it from the beginning to the end. So I will say it's helpful to start this at the beginning of the year and then carry it all the way through, because you really need to leverage the beginning of the year to lay out expectations. But they dropped from 20 to 13% in their chronic absence levels, and their kindergarten chronic absence went from 30 to 18%. And their DRA, they have reading assessment scores in their kindergarten. They have a reading assessment that actually improved from 43 to 50%. They were actually starting to see impacts. I can't absolutely say this is what made the difference, but I don't know that there was other interventions that would have made a difference that were going at the scale that this was happening. And I will say, you guys have your own KSSN experience to draw from, and you have had variations. Okay, am I allowed to say this now that we have a new superintendent? Okay, the prior superintendent wasn't quite as supportive of some of the work across the board. I'm sorry, okay, I don't. So I'm really appreciative. I hope I'm not getting myself in trouble here. So this is when you've had, I have too much history with your district or something. And like you have, this is your data over a long period of time. You're actually one of the longest initiatives to follow and track data over time. You look at Burton, which is the red, and how it went up, and okay, Marty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory is that the bleep upwards was that year that you moved schools and everyone was being relocated. Relocation does horrors for attendance, you know. And then after that, there was like this huge, once a new facility was in there, but then you managed to sustain this through 3 principals. Sibley has a fairly similar kind of trajectory. And then, you know, Alger, if you look at that, you know, when you change administrators like every single year, it does horrors for kids' attendance. You know, it just, these are, you can understand the trends. They follow the journeys of schools and what's happening. This is, again, this is actually Carol and I talking about, well, what made the difference? It was superintendent and principal leadership, district and building attendance policy, teacher, staff. You know, these are all key things that make a difference. What you have is an opportunity in all of your districts, because I know that Godfrey Lee's moving really into this, is you can take these kinds of elements and move them at scale. If you don't have them at scale in district policy, what you get is pockets of schools who, while that principal and while they've managed good principal leadership, sustain the work. It's not a long-term strategy. It's a little too charismatic principal dependent. But if you can put it into district practice, this is where you can go to scale. And I will say it does take some time. In Oakland, which is about 40,000 kids, a little over 45,000 kids, where I work a lot, we actually had have had real challenges getting district-wide impacts. Wherever we've had investments, we've had school-level significant improvements, because you have to have those 5 ingredients in place at a school. But in Oakland, because the first year that I was there, first we didn't have a superintendent because they were taking over the state. Took a while to get the superintendent place. Superintendent bought in, but then he was redoing his leadership, and we didn't have anyone who would take charge of attendance. That didn't happen. And then that year we finally got that in place, finally started to have a sort of a policy, beginnings of policy, but we had such bad state budget cuts that almost all the attendance clerks got cut. That actually doesn't help. So in California, because we're funded by attendance, when you cut attendance clerks, it always shows up present on the databases. So we had actually, I kept saying, I'm not sure about some of these numbers, but now we actually think we have really accurate numbers. We've got work, but it's like, I think it's going to be this year when we really have district-wide impact. It took a while. You can see impact at schools. So I just want also have a little patience with yourselves and build infrastructure. You got to do this for the long haul. And these are the kinds of things that you have to, as a community, work together to make in place. We have to have actionable data in every single one of your schools and districts here in Kent County. You can engage in positive messaging, and by the way, the positive messaging could even be a county-wide endeavor. I think that there's some stuff you can do locally, but there's also some materials. As a county, you could get economies of scale. Capacity building, you can do that. I mean, you guys have an opportunity because you have a county-wide system, but we have to both equip schools and their staff, but you also have to equip the community partners and take advantage of the community partners. And we have to have shared accountability where all of us see this as our responsibility, whether that's in the form of building this into your school improvement plans, whether that's in the form of building it into contracts sometimes, actually with after-school providers. That's what they've done in Baltimore. So this is my newest metaphor, and is that I think this is like the warning light on a dashboard, chronic absences. It's that check light. So I have to say that one family vacation, I was driving and we had this check light. We didn't have a chance to get it checked out. We decided we'd go ahead and drive down to my parents in San Diego, and I wasn't paying attention, and the car completely broke down on Highway 5. Me and all my kids trying to get to Thanksgiving. I have learned you do not ignore check lights. It's a really bad idea, because if you don't address it early, which could have been a simple thing, you pay a lot less than when your entire car crashes on you. And the key to a check light is asking, well, why might it be blinking? And if you don't have the skills, you get someone who has the skills to figure out why this thing might be blinking. So if there are any superintendents, I know both Superintendent Neal, David Britton with Godfrey Lieb, Bill Federhoff with, I'm going to get this, Godwin Heights. You all have signed on to this. I so appreciate this. This is also a resource for other superintendents in the area. For me, I will also say the reason why I also ask superintendents to sign on to this is I want education policy in this country is very locally driven. I want to get the U.S. Department of Ed, state departments of ed supporting local districts better. I am better able to make that argument when I tell them, this is not just Attendance Works coming up with this idea, but I have superintendents who believe that we should do this work too. They want better support on this. So I will say, I do this both because we'll promise you're like the first up for our resources, but it's also because for me, this is about forging an advocacy agenda so I can improve the extent to which our other agencies, state and federal, support your work. And so I will say I was just in Florida last week, and they said, well, we didn't get in time to do it in September. We're going to do this in October. So October works too, but you guys have launched this. You can also launch this for next year for a huge, push on September. But really, this beginning of the school year is a time for really making sure that the messaging around attendance goes out. And this is where community partners can be incredibly helpful. By the way, we have resources for you on our website if you want to do this. But here are the messages that I feel like if we all sent, kids would be better off. Attendance helps you do well in school and eventually in the workplace. That they can add up. And you can literally give kids calendars, help them add it up themselves. It's not just about you. When your kids are chronically absent, it's actually affecting all their friends too, because the churn is a problem. We've got to monitor. We have to find out as soon as it happens when kids are chronically absent so we can intervene early. And this is a solvable problem. When we work together, we can turn this around. And relationships are key in all of this. Kids come to school when they know there's someone who cares. And I will say something that you can also tap, like in New York City, they have these success mentors. They're a whole variety. They have AmeriCorps volunteers, they have experienced Corps members, they have social work interns, they have seniors mentoring freshmen in high school, they have teachers who adopt a couple kids, so they take the kids who were chronically absent the prior year, you know they're at high risk, connect them to a mentor who checks in on them, makes sure that they know they're welcome, who just makes sure they get that added little, and who know how to refer to them to more serious help if it comes up. But those relationships are key. And if we want to reduce the achievement gap for low-income kids, for kids of color, this is really essential. Now, I'm going to do one thing. So this is just to show to you that this is actually can kind of be fun. And this is one of the things that Oakland actually put together. I had very little to do with it, but I think it's a great way of showing how we can do messaging. Could you show the video, please? All right, so I'm looking at Lindsay. How do we want to do this? We can do Q&A if we have time. I'm checking. All right. Okay. Thoughts? Questions? You know what? I'm going to do one thing. Turn to the person next to you. I'm going to use this up. Just think about how you might use this work for just a minute or two. Does this resonate? There's something here that you might use in your own work? Oh, okay, I'm going to let him do this for a second, and then I'll take the question. By the way, Superintendent Neal, such a...
I apologize, my husband pulling this way.
You know what? I totally get it.
Of course, he's a baby. I'm like, come on.
I know, but there's so... Check. I will admit, I am... today's my anniversary.
Oh.
my husband, like, you know, I'm like, ah.
Oh, yeah. So that's something
I get, you know, and but if he was, you have to. When they're well.
I'm not kidding. When he called Friday night when I was at the game, he said, what kind of time can you come home? I thought, oh, no, it's never good after 36 years. It's never good. So, no, it's pretty serious.
We will find time. Your husband will never forgive you if you don't show up at that birthday. Okay. Yep. Okay. So we're going to open up just for a question or two, and then I'm going to have Lindsay. So I want to just give you, I've talked at you for a long time, so I'm glad you guys had a chance to process a little bit. I think we had a question over here.
Yes, would you talk a little bit about overcoming what we just witnessed with you and the superintendent, sharing the data, and I guess schools having the tough experiences of getting beat up so much by the public, and being in a competitive situation that if they share their data and it's not so great initially, that in fact it's an advertisement to parents and other community people to choose a different school district.
Boy, yeah, sure. Help me.
I'll take that one. You know, when it comes down to education, I think that it's really important that everyone in the community understand the data is what it is. And in order for us to make a difference, we have to begin to share, because I truly in my heart believe that these children belong to this community. And so it is not an indictment on Grand Rapids Public Schools, but the question is, where have we all been, right, for the past 4 or 5 years? And so how do we get back to where it used to be when I was a kid, when you were kids, when you had to go to school? How can we walk past Franklin and Eastern and we see 6- and 7-year-olds hanging out in the corner and we say it's not my business? And I just think as a community, and so I think people will make choices about schools. But I think at the end of the day, we have to come together to say, what are we going to do? We are looking at data based on zip codes because, again, it belongs to this community. So I have a question for the mayor, for the chief of police, for business owners, right? We all own this, and I think the only way that we can solve it is to share the data and to be totally transparent.
Thank you so much. Clearly, superintendent leadership is huge on this. I would also just add two things that I think I try to do to make it easier. When I work with districts and we give them, I always guarantee to tell them, I'm not sharing your data, you're going to share your data. So you will, and I will help you process this data before you share it. So one is not to force people to share it before they're prematurely able to talk about it and discuss it, because the superintendent has to be able to present it in a way that they feel like they're, that's key. The other thing I do find is if you can find the bright spots before you share the data, so that you say, yes, we got a challenge, but we also know solutions are possible. So well, the good news is because of KSSN and other work in the district, you have some other bright spots. Burton and Sibley may be the only ones I know about. You may have other schools that are connected to other initiatives. I just haven't seen the data as much. And when I 2 years ago, when I did a report, we actually got my state superintendent in California to do a whole chronic absence forum. And this is one of those things which happened to work, and then I realized it was a best practice, which was just before that was when I had been trying to get movement in Oakland Unified. And I had a hard time getting Oakland to move. I couldn't get it into this district-wide professional development. I couldn't do anything, but I had a great partnership with the Research Assessment and Data Department and said, let's look for your what we agreed was, because I had foundation money, I said, let's look for your bright spots. So I'd gone out and already interviewed like 8 of their principals, gone to visit a couple of bright spots. When we did the superintendent's forum and I had incredible amount of press, I kept being able to say, and go to this school in Oakland. This is a bright spot. So when the press comes out, because the other problem is when you don't, it's not just an issue of blame. We are so tired of feeling hopeless as a society, I think. There's so much bad news. And if I'm going to deliver bad news, like a third of your kids are chronically absent, I need to have some good news that says, and you know what? This does not have to be. Because this school over here, working with their community partners, shows how we can turn it around. So I'm very conscious of always partnering the challenging news with the news that this can be turned around, because otherwise you just make people feel more hopeless. That doesn't get us anywhere.
Well, thank you so much, Hedy. Let's give Hedy a round of applause. And we definitely have the chance to ask Hedy more questions at lunchtime during the table discussions. So if you do have a question, don't worry, you'll have the chance to do that in a few minutes. I only have 4 things to say, and then I'll dismiss you to stretch, enjoy the weather and the campus a little bit, and then walk over to the Weggy Ballroom. So the first is that you can follow this event on Twitter. We have a hashtag. It's #LiteracyIsKey. And thank you to Marsha Warner from Grand Rapids Public Library for reminding us that we should do that. The second thing is, if you haven't registered already, if you just came in and the registration tables were already down, we will have all of the registration information at the Weggy Ballroom at lunchtime, and then also at the academic building, so you can pick up anything you need. If you did register for SECHs or a graduate credit, please don't forget to sign out at the end of the day, and we'll have an information table at the academic building for you to do that. And if you are a presenter that Kristen and I have your materials, please see us at either the info table or find us at the Weggy Ballroom, and we'll get all of your materials to you at that time. So thank you, enjoy the day, and we have some Aquinas volunteers that will be directing us to the Weggy Ballroom for lunch.